Hey everybody, it's Chloe of Verse. Sorry that this stream is starting like 20 minutes after I planned for it. What had happened was, I just started a new job and I kind of been using like a temporary computer and like the new computer stuff came in today, but like towards the end of the day. So it took a little bit to get that all set up. So I missed the so I couldn't take the train I would normally take home. I had to stay a little later. And then good old regional rail. They've been rolling out these key cards for years. Like I think even before the pandemic, they had been rolling them out. And like it's one of those things where you're supposed to like tap at the station when you get on, and then once you're, if you at least if you get off like in the downtown area, you have to swipe to get out. And like I said, it's been years this rollout. Like I can't get like a physical pass anymore, which is my preference. And like just the disposable pass, that's it's a month or a day or however long it is. Um but like, my card has been like busted like it wouldn't swipe sometimes, like all this like foolishness, like and basically like I had been doing it for years where I did not tap where I got on my stop and like nothing happened. So I was like, whatever, I guess it's just regional rail being weird. And I just didn't think anything of it. And then today it finally caught up with me. They're like, I swipe in to try and get into this train station for go from work to home. And they're like, "Oh, you owe us money." I was like, "How on earth do I owe you money? I literally just bought my pass for the week. What is going on here?" And very helpful attendant basically explained to me that like now I have to tap on or whatever. Like I don't understand. Like literally like I've been taking the train for like a few weeks now and like I have not been tapping on my stop. No issue, no problem, nothing. But now today they're like, give us your money. So that was fun. So that's why this is real late. Um, but yeah, thank you for whoever's watching now, or to people who will be probably maybe catching the replay more likely because I'm sure people are not sticking around 20 minutes to see what was going on with me. Oh, and I also don't have Twitter on my phone, so like I couldn't post updates or let anybody know. Sorry about that. I really try to keep that stuff off my phone because I get distracted way too easily. But enough of that. Let's talk about what I read in September. Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. I read like a few things, so I'll talk about those, but like mostly I'm going to be talking about um in September was FIYAHCON 2021. And so that's what most of this is going to be about. So September, book blogger Sharonda Isadora hosted a readathon, read what you got, and the idea is just to like read stuff that's been on your TBR. And it was towards like the end of the, or sorry, books that you already own, and it was towards the end of the year. I was like, I really had not read many of the books I own, so I was like, I'll just do this. I need like something to come up with like a fun list of books for me to read, and also I need to like read the books that I own because there's like way too many I own that I have not read. So I think it was like a bingo board, but the three prompts I did were physical copy, novella, and cover love. And so for physical copy, I read What Are You Doing Here? A Black Woman's Journey in Heavy Metal, I think it was by Lena Dawes. I don't have it to show you because I donated it. I did not finish it this month. I will be ranting about that book at a later date because I had very many opinions. And yeah, I had opinions. Um, then another prompt was novella, A Spectral Hue, which I did finish and complete that month. And the last one was Cover Love, No Gods, No Monsters by Cadwell Turnbull, which was an arc I had gotten and was trying to read. and to this day, I still have not finished it. Yeah. It is just like a it's more like a literary writing style, like, also things are very, like, disconnected, so I got maybe, like, 50 pages in, and it just, like, wasn't sticking, and I was like, it's not happening right now, like, my reading has slowed down significantly from, at least, like, maybe I don't know, there was a good, like, year, I think, from maybe, like, a few months into the pandemic, where I was, like, reading a lot, I was, like, pumping out the ARC reviews, and then I feel like my reading pretty much since fall of last year has slowed down significantly, and so I really can't pinpoint any single reason of why that has been, like, I've had some personal tumultuousness in my life, but, like, I don't know, like, I can't really, like, point to any one event, you know? Um, I'm wondering if maybe it was just, like, a fluke that I was able to read so much, and, like, now this is just more realistically what I would be reading. Hey, Deidre, thanks for stopping by. Um, yeah, 'cause yeah, yeah, I could have planned this better or publicized it better, but hey, it is what it is. Here we are. Um, so I did read A Spectral Hue by Craig Lawrence Gidney. This is actually great timing, kind of. This is actually the book for the Solar Powered Afrofuturism Slow Reading Group this month. That discussion is happening May 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. If you I will throw that link in the chat while it's on my brain. But I will be hosting a discussion for that. It's going to be a good time. Um, it all happens through Zoom. So, like, if you want to chat and talk about the book, like, please feel free to stop by. Um, yeah, I'm like weird. I'm like very controlling, I think, about like book club picks. Like, for me, if I know I'm gonna have to lead a discussion on a book, I prefer to have read it already, like, even before I, like, commit to discussing it, just because 'cause I'm like, I don't wanna, like, talk about something that I hate, like, that sounds boring. Like, I mean, I guess it's, like, fun to complain, but, like, I don't wanna have to, like, come up with, like, discussion questions, you know? I just wanna be like, "This stinks. I didn't like reading it," and, like, go about my day. So, I had read this book before and enjoyed it a lot before I suggested it be a book club pick. Let me Uh, hey Tati, thanks for stopping by. Okay, so link to that event is in the chat if anyone is interested. Um, yeah, I don't really, yeah, it'll be fun because this is just like a wild book. So the premise of this book is that there's this town called Shimmer, Maryland, that is like haunted by a ghost. And the ghost, when it possesses people, it makes them make art with the same color purple in it. It's like a fuchsia shade, and like the art always seems to circle back to like these orchids that grow in the swamp nearby, and like there's like similar motifs and stuff in the art, and it's like all different types of art. Like some people make altars, some people make collages, some people like were coming up with like calligraphy fonts, um, quilts, like all this stuff. And it's about this college student who like kind of stumbles upon the trend. Like he was a fan of like one, I think it was Quilter's work, who had been possessed by the ghost. And he loved her work and he just wanted to write more about her work. And then he comes to the town and kind of realizes that there's like a whole like spate of people who like are making folk art. using this stuff and finds out about this ghost. Um, this was this one had a queer ensemble cast. Like I think there were, I want to say at least three narrating characters, and everyone was like under a different part of the quilt bag slash saga umbrella. Um, and it was just like very surreal and like disquieting, and also like haunting. Like I really, when the book ended, I didn't know what to think of like the ghost. I didn't know what to think of the ending. Um like I think it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about because it's like it could mean so many different things, but like it just feels so unsettled. Um hey Kiki, thanks for stopping by. Yeah, I need to reread A Spectral Hue, honestly, because I still need to come up with the discussion questions. Like, I have a few, but like, it's a novella. It's real short. It's like not even like it's like maybe half an inch thick, I'd say. So I could like speed through that real quick. Um, but yeah, I just there's something about the ghost's motives that was like very like confusing, but also like intriguing to me because like the ghost. Like, for me, when I think of possession, I think it's almost always, like, a negative experience, like, it's scary, it's disquieting, um, the ghost might wanna do something violent or harmful, with this other person's body, and so, like, for me, when I think of possession, I think of, like, very negative connotations, and there are, like, some negative consequences to this, like, drive to make art, like, people will, like, cut themselves off from their family. They're like letting like job obligations and stuff like that slip by and they might become unemployed. Like it is like compulsive and like borderline unhealthy, like the drive to make art. But also it was kind of like, I don't know, some of this sounds like kind of artist behavior who aren't possessed by ghosts. And like, I mean, the art sounds like it looks really cool. I don't know. It was just like a very interesting take on possession, and I had a lot to think about. I'm not spoiling anything, Kiki. Um, and also there's just like a lot of things that felt like they could be symbols. Um, and I still don't really know like what the overall use of them were. Like, for example, the color fuchsia, like the color that everyone was working into their art, like it seems always tied to deviance. Like it's like unexplained wealth, because like, how are people making this shade of fuchsia? Like, with dyes, it's, like, tied to, like, in-betweenness because it's, like, not, like, any one color. Like, it's, like, a blend of kinda, like, purple and, pink. It's kind of tied to, like, queerness as well, like, men wearing fuchsia. Um, and I still don't know why. I just that was something I felt like was a thing with that color. Um And also, like, the role of art is, like, very important in this story because there's, like, this art historian who's, like, looking at stuff, and there's, like, the other narrating characters are, like, artists or, like, knew the people who were possessed by the ghost. Um, and so there's a lot about, like, art as, like, enlightenment, like, divine connection, also, like, resistance to white supremacy, but also, like, self-destruction. It was, like, very interesting. Um, in terms of the writing, some of the dialogue felt kinda off to me sometimes, but, like, it was really only, like, maybe a few lines where I was a little, like, taken out of it. I generally really like the descriptors, which I was expecting because 'cause I've read Gidney's work before, and, like, his descriptions are just, like, tight. Like, he can craft, like, very beautiful sentences. And I interviewed him in October of last year. I think it was like the day before Halloween. So that is on my channel if you want to give that a watch. We don't get into spoilers and we talk about some of his short fiction. So then next up, um, Oh, interesting. Kiki says that's interesting. I'm used to hearing local artists talk about something like position while they do their work, so it sounded normal to me. Maybe other people feel that way, other artists, and I just like don't pay attention. I'm like a very concrete, very concrete person, very utilitarian person. I don't know. Like people talk about like the occult or like religion and stuff, and it just very much confuses me. Like it doesn't really like I don't know how to explain it. Like I understand why people believe certain things, but like for me, it's not even that I'm like, oh, that's preposterous. Like that's impossible. It's like I can't prove it either way, so I just don't think about it. So that could just be a me thing and me being weird. Um, the next up is Mirror Monster on My Wall, a steamy reverse harem Regency monster romance by Nicnevin. Um, I just was like, romance Twitter likes to talk about monster smut, and I was like, I wanted to read some monster smut and see what the hullabaloo was about. So I think no, never mind. I thought there was like some like r- there was some controversy slash fallout with a monster smut like monster romance anthology on Twitter, but I don't know the details of it, so I don't want to like give out false information. So just forget I said anything. Scratch that. Um, but this story is kind of like Alice in Wonderland meets Cinderella meets Smutty Monster Romance. Like there's this black girl in Regency, England, I guess, who is like what was I think she was autistic. And she's like doesn't she can speak, but like there are times where she can't. Um and it's like she's kind of in like a I don't know what you call it, like what do you call them? It's not really middle class because like they're like property, like landowning, like estate having people, but like she's not a noble, but like her family has money, and it kind of puts her in like a weird position because like she's supposed to be doing like all these social things and like uh getting like a marriage proposal and all that, and that's just like very much like one, not what she wants to do, and two, like not like her skill set. And she's like but she has and she's like treated like horrendously by like everyone in her family. Her dad's dead. She lives with her stepmom. Her stepmom's horrendous. Um, the like people, I guess like attendants or whatever, are horrendous. The guy that her stepmom wants her to marry is horrendous. But she has these like imaginary friends from within the Looking Glass, which is the Alice in Wonderland tie-in. Except maybe they're not imaginary, maybe they're real, and like it's like five of them, and sometimes they have. Well, actually, they pretty frequently have sex. There's a lot of like monster orgies in this book. Not a lot. There's two monster orgies in this book. Um, so this was the first erotic oh, wait, sorry, I didn't I was that comic geeky. I read Monster Smut manga, but I think I prefer beings being humanoid, I guess. Yeah, this was interesting for a first one because I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it, as like it was a fine book, like it was good, like I had fun with it, but like as like an intro to Monster Smut, I don't know how it like worked for me because the monsters are, like, really they're, like, something unique to this book. Like, I might have been better off starting with, like, werewolves or something, like, that I kinda already had in my head because it was really hard for me to wrap my mind around, like, what these things look like and what was happening because, like, like, they look glassy, but, like, I don't think they're actually, like, made out of glass, and if I remember right, they're, like, really big, like, really tall, um and I think they're almost insect-like, like, they're I think some of them have more than 2 arms, and they, like, have, like, multiple joints on the arms, and they have I thought they said they had, like, mandibles, like, the little, like, ant teeth, I thought, um, and they have claws and stuff, and it was just, like, a lot that, like, I really didn't know how to wrap my mind around, basically. Um, oh, in terms of, like, things I learned about erotica, I didn't know erotica had a plot. I really didn't. Like, this it starts off with a sex scene, and I was like, "Great. This is what I'm here for," and then we went out of the sex scene to, like, plot. I was like, "Wait, what? Come again?" I didn't I didn't realize I had a story. I was, like, thinking I was just gonna have my mind turned off this whole time. Um, but, like, it was an entertaining plot. Like, after a while, it's, like, pretty obvious where it's going, but it's, like, very entertaining as you reach that final destination. Um, also, in terms of, like, the first, like, monster smut romance I read, it's hard to keep track of who's who because like, it's, like, 4 monsters, I think, and, like, they have names and stuff, but, like, we don't really, like it's a short book, like, you don't spend much time with them. I was, like, really struggling, and but, like, each of them is, like, so distinct, but I was, like, still, like, struggling to keep track of, like, okay, like, who's doing what? Like, what? Like, who are these people again? Um, so, like, it was fun, but, like, it was just stuff like that where I was like, maybe I should have, like, started off maybe there's, like, a different way to ease into Monster Smut. Um, Tammy Kevin was, like, dedicated to, like, the Regency vibes, like, because she was even using, sorry, I think it's no, I think Tammy Kevin uses she, her pronouns, I think. Um, But Nicnevin was using, like, Regency era words to describe, like, genitals and, like, the sex scenes and stuff. Like, there's a point where some word like quim or something was used, and I was like, "What on earth is this?" And I Googled it, and I was like, "Oh, this is, like, some Regency era word for, like, vagina or something." I was like, "The dedication." I applaud the dedication to the time period. Um, Alice was a fun protagonist in this book. She was, like, unexpectedly stabby. Like, there was a point where I literally did a double take because her abusive stepmom is being abusive and she fantasized about biting her. And I was like, okay, I get that. This situation does call for violence. But then thinks about like what her blood would taste like. And I was like, wait, what? And like that's just like the tip of the iceberg. Like it gets wild. Um, so yeah, that was like a fun read. Oh, sorry, I missed that comment from Kiki. Yes, I can do werewolves. I can't do anything much more imaginative than that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I had seen that I was like, maybe this would be fun. Like werewolves, I feel like that's easy. Um, I don't know if I could do like the dragon stuff. Like I've seen the covers with like the lady and like this like dragon man, and I'm like, I don't know. This is a lot for me. But what was it? There was some comic where it was more like romance oriented. It wasn't necessarily smut. Where it was like the girl with the pig's nose and like the guy who was like a fish. Like I was like, oh, that seems interesting. I feel like I could read that. I forget what it's called though. Um, but also like I grew up watching like Inuyasha. Like to be like people with like animal body parts isn't like that big a stretch. I think it's when it's like the people look more like animals or like not people where I'm like I get a little lost. Wait, what? I think this is a series with were hedgehogs or were honey badgers. Oh my god, that's funny. Especially the honey badgers. 'Cause I don't know a thing about honey badgers that wasn't from that like viral video from like 10 years ago. I just thought they were kind of stinky and mean. But like that would be kind of a great wear transformation, honestly. Key, I have not at all tried dragons. I can't speak to it either way. 'Cause I have not either. um And then last thing I read was Baffling Magazine issue 2, which is it's run by Neon Hemlock Press, which is a queer speculative fiction press. and it is dedicated to flash fiction. So the stuff is like real short, like you read it in 5 minutes. And it was like a good issue for me. So I read Vanity Among Worms by Brent Lambert, which I mentioned in that interview with him, which you can look up. Um, which is about this like guy, this gay man who's like new in town and he goes to like a gay club. He's trying to meet new people, and it's about the club being both more than and exactly what it seems. Um, like I think there is like a twist. I think the twist you kind of like have a feel for what's gonna happen with it. But I was still like, wow, this stuff is like I don't know, something about it. I was just like, ooh, this is so pointed. Like your tone is very pointed right now, Mr. Lambert. Um, where I was like, I just had to like stop and think after I read it to stop and sit with myself. Um, so that was one I enjoyed, and then the other one I really enjoyed was Sunskins by Darius Falowo, which is like you if you have not read that, please go do it. It is like it is it is a real heavy read. Like there's a lot of homophobia and stuff in it, but like I was stressed. So this is a short story that I'm assuming is set in Nigeria because that's where actually, let me not lie. Flowo is Nigerian. The author is Nigerian, but they do write stuff in like other countries. So I should not assume where it was from. But I thought it was set in Nigeria. It is set somewhere, I think, in West Africa. Like we actually don't really know the time period or if it's an alternate world or not. But it's about this like group of young men who slip out of their skins in their sleep. And it's about what happens when their homophobic parents find out what they get up to in their dreams. Um, and it's narrated by the parents. And like I was stressed. I was stressed. I was stressed. I was stressed. That that read messed me up in the best way. Like I read it once and was like, oh, why would you do that? And like I immediately went back to the beginning and read it again. Um, and I I would have loved to interview Flowo about this, but the stars just weren't aligning. Um, but it was so terrifying, and it was just like pedal on the gas the whole time, and every time you think that like it couldn't go up another notch, it like doubled. Um, and like I'm sure there's a message in there somewhere. I couldn't figure out what the message was, but I'm sure there is one. And it was also just like to me, I hadn't read a horror story like this before. Um, because here the story is kind of narrated by the villains. Um, and also there was something about it that really like felt real and close to home in like a way that like I don't know. Like I guess like serial killers or something is a thing I should be concerned about, but like realistically that's not like even like top 10 uh threats to my life. Um but there's something that was like terrifying about because like I don't think it's a spoiler to say that the homophobic family members, homophobic parents are the villains of this story. Um and it just like reminded me that like I have some like I don't know. Let me think about what I'm trying to say here. Um it was just like that was not an angle I had seen before in a story, and also like from a narrative perspective, from how the story unfolded perspective. um, from like where the like what place the fear is coming from perspective. Um, and I think it like made me stop and like think about stuff like I don't know. Because I remember who was it? I thought it was Ebony J. Dunbar, who's another queer author, had said that like for them, speculative fiction just felt so natural because of what other world would black queer people just be like happy and protected as a default. And I remember I first heard that quote and thought that just seemed very dire, at least for like me. Like I was like, I'm not going to speak on what other people are experiencing because I know that is like reality for other people, but for me that feels very dire. And then I read this story and it just like reminded me of like things in the past or like fear-based habits I have that like I've just been doing them for so long that I don't even realize that like oh this started because I was like afraid of something. Um Stuff like that. Um and also just like made me think about like hmm I guess levels to homophobia. Like in this case the family is like pretty explicitly like probably would disown the kids if they found out that they were gay. Like if it was set in our world. Might try to, like, actually hurt them. Um, and so I think, like, for me, I was like, anything that's, like, not that extreme is, like, I'll make I can make it work or something like that. And I or even just, like, from, like, acquaintances or friends or things like that, I don't think I had, like, thought of, like, I don't know, you're I guess if you're queer your whole life, you know, and, like, that can change and your understanding of that can change and, like, things that might be safe in one place or and like one identity might not be safe or you know in another place or like not even like for me I'm not like you know worried about like the outright stuff like the violence or like my parents know I'm queer and it's like a not very much a non-issue um but like just like the fear of the unknown like not knowing you know how people will handle if things change if you realize different things about yourself or like um I don't know, just even going into certain places or like for me like there are some things that I thought like just weren't going to be hangups for me that I didn't realize were hangups like until I was like dating a woman and I was just like oh there are some things that I did when I was dating a man that like I just might not have done because that's just like not who I am as a person but like I wasn't so like worried about safety stuff that like I was like very very skittish of when I was dating um a woman. So just stuff like that. It just like really made me sit and like think about that part of my life. 'Cause it's not something I really sit and think about. So I think if you're like, I feel like it could go either way. It could be like too close to home, and you're like, I don't want to read this, or you could be like, it's too close to home, and I needed to hear this. I needed this. I need to be validated by this. I need to stop and think about this for a second. I feel like it could go either way, but like I loved it. I will be singing its praises for a very long time and foisting it on as many people as I think um, can handle it. Um, Kiki says, I find that highly relatable. Fear based behavior is so embedded in my day to day, it feels normal and not an indication of precarity. Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I don't know. It was like, yeah. I don't want to belabor the point just because I don't want to, you know, put people on the spot or like get too into it. But like, yeah, there's like a point where someone like asked me about something like I don't know. Like, it was just, like, not a thing they had thought about before, like, a friend, and they, like, asked me about it, and I was just like, oh, like, it's not really, like, a fear thing, and then I thought about it, I was like, I'm not afraid every time XYZ happens, and I thought about it, I was like, I don't know, it's kind of like putting on a seatbelt in a car or something, like, I'm not like, every time I step in a car, like, "Oh, it's gonna crash," but it's like, just in case. Um, yeah. So, um, that was everything I read in September. I'm trying to come up with, like, good little discussion questions because I know not everyone has read what I've read, and sometimes my reviews can be a little dry, and so people will have things to talk about. But I think I'm just gonna keep that in mind for next time. I didn't think of discussion questions for today's live. But in September, there was the wonderful FIYAHCON, which is hosted by it's an online virtual convention devoted to uplifting and celebrating the diversity within science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Um, and it's hosted by a lot of the organizers of Fire Literary Magazine, which is a wonderful literary magazine dedicated to publishing work of speculative fiction by Black authors. It's great. Um, I like getting their postcards as like thank you notes because I like sending stuff in the mail. Um, and I really like the work they put out. I'm going to start wrapping up the things I've read from those back issues, like, in video format, because I wanna do better at, like, supporting them, but yeah. And at this point, it is old news, but I, they do awards called the Ignite Awards, and I was nominated as was it the category was, I think, like, Best Critic, as well as Kiki, who's in the comments, and I was like, "Wow, that is, like, wild." Like like, I've basically been, like, a fan and, like, attending this convention for, like, the 2 years that it was around, and, like, I got nominated for an award, that's, like, awesome. So, that was, like I don't have words for it, that was a cool moment, and it was also very validating, because I understand that my channel can be kinda niche, and that also, like, in terms not even, like, in terms of the focus, but in terms of, like, the things that, I just do a lot of, like, author interviews with, like, people that um, might not be super, like, famous or anything like that, and, like, for me, I really enjoy that, but I also understand why it's not necessarily gonna, like, grab a whole lot of, like, viewers or subscribers or whatever, so it was, like, nice to have that validated because I think that's, like, probably the main reason why I got nominated, like, I haven't done, uh, an ARC review in a minute. Um Anyway, about FIYAHCON, I also moderated a panel because that was kinda, like, on my, to-do list for last year, like, one of my goals for last year, um, and it was the panelists were Tanaz Batena, Destiny Saria, C.L. Clark, Tasha Suri, and Andrea Stewart, and it was the panelists were fantastic. Um, I think I'm going to talk about sort of like the things that were like a learning curve for me in a different video. Because I think I don't know, for me it's like helpful in processing stuff and also like I just like making resources I think would be helpful for other people. But pros, let's start with the pros. I was like so sure I was gonna like stress vomit or like oversleep and miss it. Like I think I stayed up to like 3 or 4 in the morning, like the day before, because I was like, oh my god, like, what if I mine and it wasn't till noon or, like, 2 in the afternoon, mind you, but I was just, like, so sure that something was gonna happen, and I was, like, not gonna show up, I was gonna be a no-show, I was gonna let everybody down, so, like, that did not happen. I didn't yak on camera, great success, someone complimented my shirt, which was great, and said they wanted to be on the panel as soon as it was announced, which was, like, a big, made me feel good that I came up with a good concept, but there was a learning curve in terms of, like, it's very different from how I usually run things, like, I am kind of, I think, controlling about my channel just like when I feel like I'm in control of stuff, I just, like, relax a little more 'cause I'm like, "Okay, I know this is coming, 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 and these are the unknowns," and, like, when I have, like, a manageable number of unknowns, I just, like, feel at ease. And, like, it was just like, I don't host it, so, like, I don't, press the button to start. I don't queue up the comments for people in the crowd, um, stuff like that. Like, I had pitched it with, like, very specific people in mind, and I was only planning on, like, 3 panelists when I pitched it, and, I had, like, a full panel. I had 5 people, um, and also, you know, with stuff like, um like, interviews or anything, which was really, like, my base reference for, like, why I thought I would be okay for a panel. Um, like, I didn't realize, like, how much I just picked up on people I interviewed, like, by being on Twitter too much and, like, osmosis. Like, I don't have to put, like, too much work, I think, into coming up with author interview stuff. Like, I just kinda, like, read the stuff and have the questions and, like, maybe listen to a few interviews. Um But, like, that really was not the case here. Like, this was, like, I really only had read CL Clarke's work at the time of the panel. Like, I had read some reviews of other people's stuff and, like, some author interviews, but, like, the difference I think was, like, stark, um, like, on the back end, like, for me. Um, and I think there are ways where I was, like, trying to make it too much like a group interview when, like, a panel is kind of a very different feel. Um And also, like, when I come up with stuff, like, I know why the other person is there. Um, Whereas here, because I did not really familiar with the people's writing, it was kind of like, okay, who what part of this question can each person talk about? And like I felt like it like took me like a while to like try to come up with something where it's like, I had my vision for the panel, and then, the people, FIYAHCON team who like picked the panelists had their vision for the panel. And I was kind of like trying to like, make everything come together so it's like a fun event for attendees and stuff and like the panelists and like giving them a platform to like, get off good one-liners that people can tweet and like promote their book and like feel good about their writing. So I survived, so that is good. And I learned some stuff. And yeah, yeah. I finished, I didn't feel great about it, but I was like, it is what it is. Like I finished so many interviews, I'm just like, I should have done a bajillion other things. And it's like, I don't know, like everyone in the audience thought it was fine. Well, I don't know if everyone, but people in the audience thought it was fine. A friend was like, you seemed nervous, but it happened. It was good. I enjoyed it. So the honesty maybe, like, put me at ease. Like, if someone had been like, "It was flawless," I'd been like, "That's a lie." But her being like, "You seem like a little antsy, but, like, it was good." I was like, "Okay. I trust them." Kiki okay, circling back to the nomination, Kiki said, "Whoo, I didn't even believe it when I got the email, lol." Yeah, I was like, "What? What?" Thank you, Kiki. She said, "Your nom was very, very valid." And he just is okay with the dom, though. I love the niche. Thanks. Um, and then in terms of the panels I watched, I like really skipped around a lot. So I watched What Does Justice Look Like, which was with Bethany C. Morrow, Brittany Morris, Cadwell Turnbull, and Zinni Rockland. This year the convention was on I think it was Airtable. Last year had been on Discord. And I think Airtable was like better for like a more like immersive experience, but it was a little eh, like I think it's just always like an issue with the virtual conventions is that like sometimes things take a while to load or like there's just like little delays and stuff just because like the volume of people trying to access one thing. Um so Yeah, there was just like it was kind of like I had some issues where it was like I would try to catch like a panel or something and then I kept getting booted out or whatever, but like the way the virtual convention works is that you could get the replay for like most of the panels for like a year. So it wasn't really like the end of the world if I couldn't make it in person. Um This one had a good one-liner from Bethany C. Morrow. I don't need to wake people up. We're only pretending to be asleep. About like people asking for like this at this point. I think we're talking about racism. So I think specifically white people being like, "Oh, like how can we help?" When it's like a conversation that's been had for like years and years and years, and like especially for people who've been adults since like Ferguson and like what was that? Let me not try to put a year on that, but like people in my age range and older pretending to be helpless when this has been in the news for a very, very long time. Um, and she's just Bethany Seymour is a very good speaker. She's like very succinct. She always has like good like punchy lines. Um, and then this is also like a I think an opportunity for me to reflect on like how I do interviews. Um, so I think there's also discussions of like people being asked like why they were black girls as protagonists and like people being like, why am I being asked that? Like, no one asks white authors why, you know, they only wrote why like white protagonists are in their books. Um, I don't know if I've like asked that question before. Like, I might have like asked. I know I asked like one person about writing black queer characters, but that was because it was in their bio. If I do ask, I think it's usually like a softball type question. But yeah, I thought that was like a good like opportunity for me to like think about how and why I interview, um, and like yeah, stuff like that. Um, I think there's also like discussions around like language and like I guess the powers of language that I was like I guess a little bit more hesitant about because the thing about language is like yeah, it's like important to be able to name stuff to like say that it's a problem and like get people to understand things, but also like I think I get worried when it becomes like very prescriptive with language. Um like I'll give an example. So for example, saying like slaves versus enslaved people. Um like that is something that to me is like I actually don't know when that started to become a conversation. And, like, I don't even know where it happens offline, you know, per se, because for me, that's something I've only really ever seen online. Like, if I were to ask my younger siblings in school, like, what people say, I can almost guarantee it would be slaves. Um, and, like, there are times where I find, like, enslaved such and such useful, like, being like, "Oh," like, emphasizing, like, a skill or, like, an ethnic group or, like, enslaved, masons or, like, enslaved IFA practitioners or things like that. Because I think that is something that, like, at least how I was taught in school, I didn't really think of it like that. Like, I didn't realize, like, oh, people were skilled laborers. Like, people had skills and heritages and things that like transferred over. So I think there are ways that, like, when it's just like slaves that it flattens that. But also, I think sometimes I don't know. Like for me, I never forgot that they were people, even when I like flatten certain things. Um, And I think I'm more wary of it when it becomes, like, a prescriptive thing to, like, check people on when it's, like, this is a conversation that's had in a very specific space, and I'm, like, worried about it being, like, a barometer for people who might not ever have that conversation. Like, I don't know, there's a point where I started seeing infographics about it, and I was, like, a little worried, and it's, like, also, like, I don't know, like, for me, I think sometimes there can be a focus on language over, like, action. Like I get worried sometimes where it's like a focus on like language at the detriment of the focus of action, which I don't think was what anyone was proposing, but that was just like a thought I had while I was sitting in on it. Because I think I also use these things as like a time to just like think about stuff and like be clear with myself on stuff and like why I do things or why I don't do things, or like do I want to change how I do things? Because I don't really think and reflect like that often. Um, Kiki says I need to get caught up on the archives. It's bad. I definitely need to get caught up on the archives. I need to figure out when they close because they disappear after a year because they can't just host them indefinitely. He said, "I heard about it in academic circles." That's how I heard about it too. Like I heard about it kind of on like grad school Twitter, like a few years ago, and it kind of had stayed over there. And then like I sort of maybe last year started to see it coming over, at least into like YA author sphere. Um, but like I still don't really hear it out and about, you know. Um, and like specifically, this could just be people online being weird, but like I had seen like someone being like writing someone off because they said slaves versus enslaved people when it was kind of like that was like not, they were making other points that were valid, like because they weren't like in with this like kind of niche conversation doesn't mean that like they can't be saying things that like are important or should be listened to, I guess. Um, but I feel like this is like always what happens online with like the language thing. People start doing us for some stuff with who knows what language and like not always being like, oh, like how did I learn this language? Is that a thing that everyone might know or is that reasonable to expect? Or like focusing on that over kind of at the detriment of like anything else. Um, is like just a very online thing, and I am too online, so that's the thing I see. It might not actually even be an issue out in the real world. Then there was Sink Your Teeth Into It, Vampire Myths from Around the World by Rin Chubico, Sydney Page Guerrero, Isabel Canis, and Giselle Liza Anatole. I really don't have thoughts on this. I was just like listening to stories about vampires from around the world. They're talking about vampire stories from the Philippines, a little bit about like Sakunians' vampires, and Giselle Liza Anatole is an academic who'd written a book on like vampires and vampiric creatures in the Caribbean, which I got for Christmas and I still need to read. And I was very excited to read it, and so it was cool to like see her on the panel. Um, and then there was Setting Fire, Breaking Down Barriers to Publishing for Budding Writers, which was Kel Coleman, W.C. Dunlap, Osahan Ize Iyamu, and LP Kindred was moderating. And this was just like a lot of fun. This was another like head empty panel where it was just like nice to see everyone like talk about their experiences and stuff. Also, I was like, Osahan has no business being so young and so talented. Like, I think he's like, I mean, he's gonna be older now 'cause it's been a year, but like, I think he's like early 20 that he's like published like I wanna say, like, 5 short stories. I was like, "Dang." In college, no less. Um, and Kel Coleman had a very sweet story about their first, like, short story acceptance. So it was, like, just nice to see people being so energized about, like, what they're writing and, like, their journey. It was nice to see. LP Kindred did a great job moderating. So there's next was Magic of Mess, which was Zoraida Cordova, Sarah Mughal, Kiki Nguyen, Craig Lawrence Gidney, Kirky Moskowitz, and Vida Ayala. And that one just like I think had a lot of good questions that aren't gonna have answers, but like I think it's gonna be helpful for me in like coming up with reviews or like thinking about how books are received and stuff. Um, because it was kind of like talking about like who is the Magic of Mess was about like what characters are like generally like accepted and like lauded and like enjoyed for being messy, or like imperfect, flawed, maybe kind of like um vengeful, mean or destructive, and which characters have to be kind of like a paragon of virtue to get like interest from readers. And I think that was a very interesting conversation about like what is morality and who decides it, and also like what is relatability and who decides that. I think I'm very curious personally about the conversations about like humanization, like humanizing villains and what that does or does not accomplish. Um Yeah. Um, is there anything more for me to say about that? Like, cause like, I guess for me, my thing is that, like, I know some people are, like, wary of, like, I don't know, I guess I don't know if it's doing, like, complexity of villains, but, like, talking about the non-villainous things that villains do. Um, because like, especially when it ties on to, like, real world, like, power dynamics, how, like, people kind of rush to forgive or brush aside the wrongs that those people do. Because like, oh, like, they like puppies or whatever, like, they're nice to, like, one person. Um, but, like, I don't know, for me, it, like, doesn't humanizing a villain doesn't take away from them being the villain, you know? Like, to me, that's just, like, life, I guess, that, like, someone could be, like, really horrible to me, but, like, maybe they have, like, a daughter or someone that they really dote on, and this daughter is gonna think the world of them and that, like, they're the best person ever, and if I were to come up and be like, you know, "Your dad did X, Y, or Z to me," they'd be like, "What? Him? No, never." Um, it's just interesting, I guess, like, to me thinking about, like, are there craft things that are done where it's kind of like, this person isn't just, like, horrendous to everyone 24/7, even though maybe that could also be the case for certain villains, but, like, is it a craft thing in being like this person maybe isn't horrendous 24/7, but, like, they're still a villain, this stuff still isn't acceptable, or is it just, like, a reader mindset thing, um, in terms of, like, who we rush to excuse and, like, who we're a little bit more critical of? Um, and then next one was another head empty panel. Drift compatibility, mecha and gender, which was Carolyn Tung Richmond, Andrea Tang, Kat Overland, Zoe Hana Mikuta, and Arune Singe. Um, I was just like, yay, giant fighting robots. Let's talk about giant fighting robots. They're real great. They're real cool. I say this as if I'm watching like all of the mecha when like really it's like Pacific Rim, which like everyone has seen, Megas XLR, which was like a mecha parody. And then Neon Genesis Evangelion. What other ones I really go for? Like I guess Power Rangers. I really did like the Zords and Power Rangers. And then I'm trying to see, like it's less than five that I can name like off the top of my head like that. But I'm just like I really like the idea of giant fighting robots. Like what more could you want in a story? Um Yeah, I can't name a single one. I'm a big fan, and I'm very okay with that. Um, there's a panel now, that's what I call magical realism, which I kind of like had to like dip in and out of because of technical difficulties. About like what is magical realism, what isn't magical realism. Because it's a label that I think was created to talk about. I thought it was you know what? Let me not get to lying. Google's right here. Let me look that up real quick. Okay. So, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, magic realism is chiefly Latin American narrative strategy that is characterized by the matter of fact inclusion of fantastic or mythical elements into seemingly realistic fiction. So, there were discussions about, like, you know, is it magic realism if it was written by someone outside of Latin America? Um, Are there certain, like, biases in how readers apply the label of magic realism? Because I feel like people don't really know what it is. Like, I feel like it kinda gets, like, thrown I really shouldn't say that as if right? Because I don't really even know what it is. I don't know what it is. I have not read any to compare it to, but, like, there's some things that people will apply it to, like, I remember I'd seen someone call Year I Flew Away by Marie Arnold magic realism. I was like, this really doesn't seem like it fits the bill to me. Like, I don't know, like, to me, there's, like, a distinction between magic realism and, like, I don't know, like, a contemporary fantasy or a historical fantasy, and, like, I don't really have strong opinions on it, like, where the line is drawn, and why, but, like, I don't know, to me, like, Your Flew Up felt like a pretty straightforward, like, contemporary fantasy, so I was confused why someone would call it magic realism. Um, we talked about stuff like that, or they talked about stuff like that, the panelists. Um, and what else? It was also interesting to think about, I don't know, someone brought up like their definition, like for them, they're like, magic realism is a tool for the oppressed to like discuss their conditions. And like that's kind of like their thing on like who writes magic realism. And I was wondering what that looks like in like, I don't know, context outside of the United States. Um, yeah, where it's like, yeah, where basically there are people who are like, I don't know, like descendants of like colonizers, like on both sides all the way back, and who still live in countries that are like subject to imperialism and stuff like that. Um, like I was curious what people would make of that scenario. And how magic realism fits into that or does not fit into that. Da-da. I know Kiki has strong opinions about this. I remember seeing you. I thought at both the Mecha panel and the Magic Realism panel. Kiki said, "I'm very excited about Neon Yang's new series, which is Mecha. First book is the Genesis of Misery. I'm excited to read that too. I've been kind of like reading more. Eh. I don't want to just like group. I feel like it's just like so general to be like reading more Asian American fantasy and sci-fi. Cause like it's like really the stuff I've been reading is like so sparse all over the place. So let me not even say that. But I have been trying to. I do want to read that book by Neon Yang. Um, and there's like a few books. I don't know. Also, just because like I grew up in an area where it's like predominantly white, and then like the next largest racial group would be Asian Americans. Um, and just realizing that like I don't know, they're just like things that like I never asked about my friends' lives or like folklore or things like that, and like trying to like I don't know, I felt like a bad friend basically, and like trying to like connect basically through like things I think that they might be interested in too, but that are kind of like in my realm as well, like through fantasy as opposed to like reading up on history when it's like, they might not know the history either, want to talk about the history. I don't, that was a very roundabout way. I don't think that made any sense, but basically it was like, wow, I have these friends who are like Indian American or like Vietnamese American, and like I never really asked them a whole lot about like, you know, their parents' culture or things like that. Like I felt like there were things that I like learned in the past couple years where I was like, I've known you for like so long. I never asked. I never knew. Like I feel like a not great friend. Um And I guess, like, trying to find, like, small ways to connect with them, like, so, like, I guess for me, stories is kind of, like, easy to be like, "Oh, like, I read this in this story, like, what do you think of this story?" Like, maybe we both read it and talk about it and have opinions on it, or just tell them that, like, "Oh, like, you told me this thing, and, like, I'm not super familiar with it, but I saw it in this book, and I thought that was cool." Stuff like that. Um, Kiki says, I think the discussion of having meaning outside of Latin America would require a discussion what Latin America is. Yeah, I don't understand. Like, truthfully, I didn't learn a lot about, like, there's, right, all these terms have a history, right? Like, like, I don't know, like, I feel like people, like, say, like, my parents' age grew up using, like, Hispanic as, like, a default, and now it's, like, Latina or Latine is, like, kind of, like, the default, and, like, those mean different things, but, like, right, there's, like right, like, terms give, like, solidarity and, like, also, like, create groups, and it's, like, who does the solidarity help? Why is this group being formed with this term? And, like, that's just, like, not a thing I learned in school, like, again, online too much, it's, like, I find it in, like, random news articles online. Um, and that's not something I've read a lot about, so I don't know much about it. Interesting. Kiki says some of the most famous magic realism authors are Caribbean or studied the Caribbean as an influence. I didn't know that at all. Kiki said, I should go watch it, but I also tend to avoid these discussions because I'm not at all invested in the term. It doesn't add or clarify text meanings for me. Okay, so I lied about seeing you at the panel then. Sorry for spreading lies on the internet. Um, yeah, I get that. Like, yeah, I think I've already talked about how I feel about genre. I don't need to like go into it more. Like it's a means to an end, and I don't feel like, and especially with like genre, I don't feel like I'm the one who determines that necessarily per se. Like, if an author's like, "This is what I write," I just default to that. Then I watched the guest honor speech for Vita Ayala, which was really cool. They write comics, and I've read a few of them. I've read Livewire, and I thought, and The Wilds. Livewire is a superhero comic, and The Wilds was like the comic that got me into like buying comics, like getting a subscription list and everything from like the comic store near me. It was like about a zombie apocalypse, but the you can tell, like, who's been infected because they have, like, flowers and mushrooms growing off of them. Um, so I just the artist was Emily Pearson, and I love the artwork, and so that was, like, one of the first comic books I got when I was, like, trying to find a comic store. So it's cool to see them talk here, and also because like, I don't know a whole lot about the comics world, especially on, like, the more corporate side, like, people who write for Marvel or DC, because like, Vita Ayala has written for a lot of different places, but I thought they'd done a lot of, like, Marvel works specifically. Um, and they had some interesting insights about, like, basically working in, like, a franchise that's, like, decades long, and basically, like, even if, like, they create a marginalized character who, like, doesn't hmm, who, like, doesn't get a lot of screen time or page time in, like, whatever project they're working on, that character now exists, so, like, if anyone else who, like, really wants to, like, pick it up and, like, give the character more page time and more depth and do stuff with it, like, they can, which was, like, a very interesting concept to me because like I said, I didn't know about too many people who wrote, like, comics for, like, these, like I hadn't read too many interviews with people who, like, wrote comics for these, like, big corporations. And then another really exciting one was in Jerry of Onyx Pages was the guest honor last year, which was well deserved. It was really wonderful to see her being celebrated. Very happy for her. And LP Kindred is a friend of hers, like hosted it, and it was just like so nice to see. Like I don't know, it was just like very sweet to see, very nice to see. I was so happy for her. Head empty, no thoughts, no notes. And then one of my favorite events was M Dash, which was like a game show for writers. So the thing is like with M Dash, there's like a panel of writers and they're given like a certain number of words. And they have to like write like within like 50 minutes, they have to write all of the words. And it's just interesting all the different ways it can go. So Brent Lambert hosted, he was a great host. And then the one session I caught, the writers were Dave Ring, Nino Cipri, Georgina Kirsten, and Sean Dowie. And it was just, like, really funny, the stories that people came up with, like, I think Sean's was my favorite because it was, like, hilarious. Like, it was basically about this guy who was cursed. Wait, no. He went to a wizard to, like, solve a problem, and then somehow the wizard cursed him that, like, every time he speaks, like, a baby comes out of his mouth, and it's, like, about basically how this ruins his life. Like, people want he, like, becomes kind of famous, and people want, like, one of these, like, word babies, but then, like, the word babies, like, become evil and stuff and, like, rise up and, like, try to take over the world, and it was, like, just really funny. Um yeah, but, like, tone-wise, there were, like, a lot of different directions they went. Like, Dave Rings was more serious. His was, like, exploring this, like, cave with, like, someone that you can't see who you think is your friend, but, like, you don't really know. Like, there are things in the cave that, like, snatch people up and impersonate them. Then Nina Cipri's was more funny too. Theirs was about it's basically about people on Goodreads. Um, it was, like, basically, like, the life cycle of, like, how people, like, talk about books, like, through, like, tracking, like, this one person's Goodreads from, like, when they were, like, 12 to, like, 30 or something like that. And then Georgina Kristen did, like, a sort of, like oh, it's kinda like a erotic paranormal romance. Um, so it was cool to see people, like, come up with all these different, like, directions and genres from the same words. Um, he says, "I never seen M Dash, I missed out." It was a lot of fun. I think there was another one that I caught. I didn't have written down who the panelists were for that one though, but it's just, like, really funny. Um, Especially because you get to watch the authors perform the work too, and so the people who are, like, really, like, dramatic readers make it, like, really great. Like, I remember RSA Garcia had, like, a hilarious one about, uh, let me not lie about where RSA Garcia is from. RSA Garcia is from Trinidad, and it was about, like, this older woman who, like, accidentally summons this, like, cursed warrior to Trinidad, um, and, like, what she does when he shows up. And then, let's see, how many panels do I have left? Okay, so I'm gonna talk about 3 more panels, and then I'm gonna wrap up. So then there's also Decolonizing Narrative Structures, which was Iori Kusino, Yulin Wong, Woody Hiriaka, and Daphne Lee, which I didn't catch the whole thing for, but, like, the main questions I think from that panel were what is time and what is conflict? Like, they talked a little bit about, like, alternative narrative structures to, like, I think that if you live in the US, you probably see the 3 act the most. Um, and, like, I honestly didn't even know there were other narrative structures until, like, Twitter a few years ago. Like, I thought it was kinda like just everything just got, like, smushed into the 3 act. But, like, there's, like, 4 acts and, like, gosh, I'm forgetting. I don't remember what they're called, but, like, there's basically other ways that people structure stories, which I didn't know about. So that was a really cool discussion because it was like, oh, it gave me a lot of stuff to, like, look up. And then the last ones was From the Margins to the Center, Content Creation Across the Global South, which was Shayleg, Chronicles of Noria, Sajid, and Kiki. um, and yeah, I think the main actually, I feel weird talking about that with you here, Kiki. I don't want to be like, this is the main point, and then Kiki's like, that was not the main point. I'm gonna feel like I wasn't paying good attention. Um, but I think I'll say what one of my takeaways was is that, like, people refer to, like, BookTube or the bookish side of the internet as a community. Um, but I guess it becomes more of a clique where people kind of hang out with people who are similar to them, and that is hmm, This was talking specifically about content creators in the global south. So like basically talking, I remember people talking specifically about how um fundraising efforts for like different like disasters and things were just like going unnoticed. Um and how it's like if we are a community, then I guess why is that? Um yeah, I'm not doing a great job of explaining the panel at this point. I apologize. Um but yeah, I think for me a thing that I realized was that there's so much international news that I only know about through Twitter because like I have Twitter people who live there and tweet about it. Like it's just stuff that like I would not see in the news, or, like would not my parents watch the news and like they wouldn't necessarily have heard about it through there. And so there is like a power in the bond, the personal connections we form with people online. Um hmm. Basically we should support content creators from the global south. And I'm not doing a great job of explaining my I'm just not doing a great job explaining or talking right now. I apologize. And then the last panel that I'm going to talk about is Knocking Boots, which was Victor Manibo, Naomi Day, Bendy Barrett, Cecilia Tan, and C.L. Clark, which was about basically writing sex and fantasy books or sci-fi books. Um, and this was one I kind of unfortunately couldn't watch all because of technical difficulty stuff. I was very excited because Bendy Barrett was on this panel, and he wrote like an excellent piece of flash fiction in Baffling magazine called it was something about duppies, but it was like a 2 POV, like choose your adventure almost. But it was just like so oh, it's just called Duppy, that's it. That's the title. And it was like, um it was just like so sensual and like I loved it. It was like so lush in the descriptions and felt like very like intimate and close. And so I was like, I'm really excited to see what he has to say on this panel. Um, and it was like really cool. Because Cecilia Tan, who was one of the panelists, I think started a press. I think Cecilia Tan. Okay, Cecilia Tan is the founder of Circlet Press, which is kind of like one of like the first presses devoted to, like at least in the US, I think, devoted to writing like erotic science fiction and fantasy. And so it was really cool to hear from her, like how she started out kind of making zines and then moved into like more of like a press like book format and stuff. And like her like approach as an author to how she like writes about sex and stuff. Um so I've been like I know people over on romance Twitter and like I like dabble my toes in romance Twitter once in a while. And romance Twitter, no. I dabble my toes in like romance books once in a while. But it's like something that like which isn't to say that every romance book has erotic elements to it. Like it might not, but like that's just where I'm most likely to see it in what I read. Um But, like, it's just, like, not a thing I thought about a whole lot, and I was, like, I'm really excited to see that here as well because I think sometimes there can be, like, weird, like, genre divides, where, like, people get, like, siloed away or, like right, like, if it's, like if I were to say I am a fan of, you know I don't know, like, for example, like, I feel like there's so many romance readers who read, like, paranormal, supernatural romances, but, like aren't really considered part of, like, fantasy, like, Twitter, BookTube, what have you, and I was like, "Well, why is that? Like, why are they just over considered just over romance when, like, they do, read fantastical stuff?" Um, and I think there can be kind of, like, a weird like I think some people, like, uphold a certain image of, like, what a fantasy fan is, where it's like you read the door stoppers about the military. J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy is your Bible, and that is a real fantasy fan. And if you don't do that, you're not a real fantasy fan. And it's like nice that I was like talking about erotica and like romance and stuff in fantasy and being like that is fantasy too. And just making space for that if people want to take it. Um so I enjoyed that panel. And I did buy some stuff from okay, so Circle Press had actually published that N.K. Jemisin short story that someone had recommended at last year's FIYAHCON. And then I bought Cecilia Tan's she had published something through Circle Press. And I was like really intrigued after she gave this talk and I wanted to read it. So gave that a read. Um but yeah, that's all I have to say. I will stick around for like maybe like 5 or 10 minutes if people want to chat about how their reading's going or how their day is going. Um, just why not? Could be fun. He said, I missed most of what you said. My internet's not cooperating with me. Perfect. The internet was on my side. He said, I used to read a lot of romance novels, but now I'm all about webtoons and manga. I should get into webtoons. Like, I have like a list of webtoons I want to read, but like, I just never sit down and do the reading. I feel like that's just the story of my life as a reader at this point. I should do that, but I will not. I will scroll I will scroll Twitter instead of doing the reading. Um I've been trying to like find romance manga recs. I've been looking for more like sapphic stuff though, just cuz like I don't know, I've just been looking for it cuz I knew it was a little harder to find. Um or at least it doesn't get as hyped um on the internet. And yeah, I don't know. That's more of a discussion for next wrap up because next wrap up is going to be November, where pretty much everything I read was like a sapphic romance or erotica, and I'm gonna get more into like how all that stuff went for me. Um, but yeah, I haven't. I also just haven't been reading manga like that. Like I'm trying to think of like what type of titles my library has. Like I usually get stuff through the library, and like I think the manga at the library is like geared more towards like teenagers. Like it's like the Narutos and they probably had Inuyasha, like stuff like that. I I've seen Inuyasha categorized as a romance anime, and like for me, I'm like, I mean, I guess it's there, but to me it feels like subplot. Like I feel like it gets kind of lost. Oh, at least that's not why I watched it. I watched it for the Monster of the Day stuff. I think the romance is kind of weak in Inuyasha, but that's just me, I guess. He says I'm addicted to them lately. I love this for you. Ooh, can't wait for it. Oh, that's something I can ask. So I mentioned kind of earlier that like I'm trying to keep the lives fun and that like sometimes people don't have much to say if I'm just like being dry and talking about what I read. And also like if you haven't read the book, it's kind of like hard for people to find like an in. And so next time, because I'm talking about like all these romance books I read, I thought it'd be fun to like talk about like my opinions on dating stuff or share like funny dating stories I have. And so since you're here, if you have like questions you'd want to ask or like prompts for like a long-winded Chloe ramble, um leave them in the comments and I will see what I can do. I already have how many do I have planned out at this point? So I got started already. Um like I actually might be maxed out. but, like, maybe one of the suggestions you'll have is gonna be better than what I have right now. Like, right now I have dating profile red flags, dating profile green flags, how my dating habits have changed, um, like, hypothetical questions, like, "Would you date a friend of your ex?" Dating bucket list, and then for the story times, it's, like, dating fails, I'm not gonna say the prompt for one of the stories because the other one that's just like a giveaway, you have to show up to hear it. Hmm. And the other ones are, like, too specific, like, I'm gonna have to find a way to massage them soon, because like, I like giving people the options where it's like, "Do you want this one or this one?" Um, like, I did that once, I remember, and I had a lot of fun where I was like, "Here are the 2 story prompts, what do you wanna which one do you wanna hear?" Um, so it'll hopefully be a good time. I'm also putting it up on Twitter just to, like, get feedback from people and what they'd wanna hear. Um, obviously, if I like, I'm it's just gonna be, like, fun, like, lighthearted stuff, like, it's not gonna be, like, serious relationship advice for me because I'm single, and why would you take my relationship advice? Um, but yeah, gonna be keeping it light. He says, "I definitely want the dating stories, but otherwise I'm bad at on the spot prompts." That's fine. Um, we'll see we'll see about the dating stories. It's gonna be interesting, I think, to see people's reactions to the stories because I think they're hilarious, but it'll be interesting. I think it'll also be just, like, fun to do something where I'm not talking about books, and it's maybe a little bit more personal because I don't think I really talk about myself outside of what I read. Um, also, if people wanna talk about what they're reading a little bit, that'll be cool. I so I had this stack of, like I think it was, like, 13 books I just impulsively snagged from my library 'cause I was like, "The covers are pretty, and, like, it's good for the numbers, and maybe they'll buy more copies, so I don't feel bad about taking up books that I will not be reading." You just can't kill me about that. And I kinda got to the point where I'd, like, renewed them as many times as I could, and I was like, "I have 2 weeks to read these books. I'm not gonna read 13 books in 2 weeks. I need to pick 3." And I did not read 3, I read 2. I was gonna read Jumpy God's Revenge, which is a middle grade, fantasy, last in the trilogy. I was gonna read Early Departures by Jason. Let me look up the author because I always there are 2 authors whose last name is Reynolds and the first name starts with a J, and I have not read anything by either of them yet, and so I always, like, switch the names so I don't associate anything with it yet. Okay, Early Departures by Justin A. Reynolds. It's like a YA sci-fi about this, teenage boy whose friend has died recently, and there's like this sci-fi procedure that brings temporarily brings back the dead. And it's about like what they talk about when this guy's back from the dead and like how it makes the protagonist feel. And I've heard like really great things about this author and this book, and so I've been wanting to read it for a while, but like I didn't get to it. I kind of just had to return it. Um, and then there was Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sulin. I've been calling it, like, everything but its name. Like, I was talking to someone about it yesterday, I think I changed the name, like, at least 3 times, and, like, not even close. Like, I think at one point I was thinking New Moon's Arms, and so, like, New Moon Goddess worked its way in there somehow. It was a mess. Um, but I'm, kind of annoyed because I had to return it, but had, like, 100 pages left. But I just like it's due tomorrow. I just wasn't gonna read 100 pages between now and then, and I didn't want to get library fines, so I had to return it. Um, because it's like getting I don't know, like I had like really high expectations for the book going in, so I was inevitably like let down. Like I was like, I'm enjoying myself, but like this wasn't what I was hoping it was gonna be. Um, but the character Yeah, Kiki. New Moon's Are was very Twilight. Like I was just grasping at straws. Um, and I was like, so it wasn't what I was hoping it was gonna be, but like I think the things that's making it shine for me are like the secondary characters. Like I wanted a little bit more of the magic. Like right now it's just kind of like casually in there. And like also like the like politics of the like immortal realm and all that. Which is was introduced a little later in the book. But for me, what's making it shine is like the sort of like this love triangle and like the secondary characters. And it was so dramatic. It was so dramatic. I got to a part where like there's a plot reveal which I kind of figured was gonna happen, but like my favorite character in it so far is Li Wei, who's one of the love interests. He's like the emperor's son, and there's like tension. There's like feuds between the emperor and like um the protagonist of the story. So like she's like not trying to get too close to the family. And like there's he has like other obligations as like heir to the throne. But like he's my favorite character because he's just so silly and like he just did something that wasn't even silly. I was just like, wow, like you really thought that? Like, oh my goodness. Also, like people are losing their tempers left and right and like saying things that like they probably shouldn't. Like, I'm surprised that people like some people walk some of the things they said back. I was like, what? Why would you say that to someone that you care about? Um, but yeah, it's like there was just like a big, like really dramatic moment. And I had to return the book before I could find out what happens at the end. So I just took a picture of the page so I can like pick up where I left off. Um, so I mean, hopefully no one will check it out before Saturday because it's like a book that like my library has. It's not a request. So like hopefully I can just like mosey in on there on like Saturday and just like get it back and finish those last 100 pages really quick. But yeah, um, I think that's all I should be saying for now. It's getting a little late, and I all I had for dinner was like two macarons that I like snagged from this big box my friend got me as I walked up here to film. So I should probably go eat real food. But thank you everyone for joining it and entertaining this like super duper long rambly video. Um, and I will hopefully see you next I think I'm gonna keep it Monday at 7. Next Monday at 7 for the romance extravaganza. And also I'm doing an author interview this Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern time with Ayodele Olofintuade, who is a short story writer who wrote um my favorite thing they've written is The Woman with a Thousand Stars in Her Hair, which is a mommy watches story in an affluent press. So very excited that I get to talk to them, and I will hopefully people can like come out, and if not, you can always catch the replay. But yeah, it's gonna be a good time. And yes, Kiki, I'll go eat real food. Um, yeah, all I had for lunch was like leftover pickled radish from takeout from like a week ago. Yeah, I haven't really eaten today. I should go do that. Anyway, yeah, thanks for watching. Bye everyone. Have a good rest of your day.